I shouldn't have put up my list so quickly. Okay. Now is that on? All right. And then there's one more piece of electronics that I got to turn on. Okay. We'll see if it all works by the time I get done. As you can see on the screen, we're going to visit the biblical concept of oaths. Okay, but I've entitled my sermon, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So if you will make a deal with me, for a fistful of dollars, I will preach for 30 minutes. And for a few dollars more, I'll preach for 25. But if I preach till high noon, you are free to all stand up in one accord and holler out, hang 'em high. My aim is to reach out to the unforgiven today. So go ahead and make my day if you feel lucky. And I had to put a caveat in there. I'm sorry to those who watch The Office. I am not trained in office talk. You know, I don't know any of those quotes, so we had to stick with Clint Eastwood and his movies. But laying that aside, what is an oath? What does an oath contain in it? How does it work in the lives of those who make one? Well, it's the same if you're talking Bible. It's the same if you're talking legal. It's the same if you're talking treaties among countries. The idea of oath is the same across the board. It's a formal promise that binds an individual to do as pledged under the threat of some penalty. And so that's why I'm calling it the good, the bad, and the ugly. Oaths are taken seriously from the earliest of human history. As we read in the Bible, there are plenty of them to choose from, and I've chosen a couple. And oaths actually become the foundation of our faith. Now, that might not be provable in the first slide, but by the time we get to the fifth slide, I think that we will have established that idea, that the oath becomes the foundation of our faith. All right, so first of all, Joshua 9. If you want to go ahead and turn there, you can. If you don't, you can just listen to me, and we'll talk about it. But Joshua and the children of Israel have already crossed over into the promised land. They have already beaten Jericho. They have already destroyed Ai, and they are on their way to destroy other cities as well. Well, the Gibeonites live close by, and they have decided that they will dress up in old clothes, worn out sandals, and take old bread and old worn out wineskins, put them on mules, put them on pack animals, and go to Israel and find them where they are, and then find a way to make a treaty. And so that's exactly what they did. They went and they found the Israelites, explained that they were from a faraway country, which was actually just over the next hill. All right, they had 3 great, huge cities. And they convinced the Israelites that they were from far away. And so they made a treaty. They spoke an oath between them. And now they are no longer enemies. They are friends. Now, that was a little ugly on the part of the Gibeonites, wasn't it? Yeah, they used an oath to gain an advantage. Okay, it's kind of like what, Herschel was telling me a story yesterday. He said that when his dad died, he had some land and some cattle, and the family got together and was talking it over and trying to figure out how they were going to divvy up all the cattle and the land and all of that. And so one of the brothers just simply said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll be the agent to sell the land. And when I sell it, he says, I'll sell it within 2 weeks. And everybody went, well, that sounds really good. Well, everybody dispersed. went home, and in 2 weeks, he wrote to all of his siblings and said, the land's been sold, I'm the buyer, and I used my commission to do the down payment. And he ended up with the land, the cattle, and everything. Well, the whole family went, huh? You know, that was a strange way to go about it. It was kind of a ruse. It was a little bit like the ruse of the Gibeonites. Of course, the Gibeonites, that's a much graver situation. But that kind of ruse, it's binding. Look at chapter 10. Adonai-Zedek was the king of Jerusalem, and he said that because the Gibeonites had made a treaty between the Israelites and them, that he was going to call 4 other kings, and they were going to destroy the Gibeonites. Well, how did that sit with the Gibeonites? Said, okay, we'll just start here in verse 4. Come up to me and help me, and let's attack Gibeon. For it has made peace with Joshua and the sons of Israel. So the 5 kings of the Amorites, and the king of Jerusalem, and the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon, they gathered together, went up, and with all their armies encamped by Gibeon, and fought against it. Look at verse 6. Then the men of Gibeon sent word to Joshua at Gilgal, saying, do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly. Save us and help us, for all the kings of the Amorites that live in the hill country have assembled against us. So you see, the Gibeonites came to Israel, made a peace treaty with them, and then took off, went back home. The story is that Joshua and the people of Israel came around the corner, and there were the Gibeonites. It was really distasteful in their mouths that they had made a peace treaty with somebody who was so close. But that's not all. As soon as the Gibeonites are in trouble, who do they call on? You got it. They call on the Israelites to come help. Well, I don't know if it's the providence of God. I don't know how that all worked. It's not stated in here. But all night long, the men of Israel, the warriors, and Joshua chase to Gibeon. And they find all those armies and those kings there, and they decimated them. It's probably one of the most famous stories in the Bible. Do you remember Joshua praying that the sun would not go down? That's this story. The sun didn't go down, and Joshua and the Israelites decimated those 5 kings. The ones that even ran away were covered up with hailstones. I mean, it was a total destruction kind of situation. Joshua and the Israelites had made an oath, and they had to keep it, even to the point of possibly losing their lives. Oaths are very, very strong things, and they cannot be broken. But you know, for every oath that America made to Indians, guess what happened? We broke them. Well, let me share with you a situation just like that. Look at 2 Samuel chapter 21. David is now king. Saul has been killed. Jonathan has been killed. They've been set out in front of Beth-shan, hanging on a stick, and they dried there. When they finally could, they took their bones home and they buried them. But here's chapter 21, starting with verse 1. Now there was a famine in the days of David for 3 years, year after year, and David sought the presence of the Lord. And the Lord said, it is for Saul and his bloody house, because he put the Gibeonites to death. So the king called the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not of the sons of Israel, but a remnant of the Amorites, or the Hittites. And the sons of Israel had made a covenant with them, but Saul had sought to kill them in his zeal for the sons of Israel, and Judah. Okay, so here's the story. You know how long the story has been going on since they made that first oath, made that first treaty? Over 300 years. How many promises have you kept for a period that long? There's nobody here. How many people expect to keep a promise that long? Maybe we don't. That's why treaties end up being broken, because we no longer accept the terms of the treaty, and we simply give up. When God's people made an oath to the Hivites, to the Gibeonites, God expected his people to keep that oath, even 300 years afterwards. Now, the story, as far as I could tell, is not written in Scripture, the decimation of Gibeon. But it is written here after David becomes king. And so he said to them in verse 4, we have no concern of, or the Gibeonites answered David, and they said, we have no concern of silver and gold with Saul or his house, nor is it for us to put any man to death in Israel. He said, I will do for you whatever you say. That's what David responded. So they said to the king, the man who consumed us and who planned to exterminate us from the remaining within any border of Israel, let 7 men from his sons be given to us, and we will hang them before the Lord in Gibeah of Saul, the chosen of the Lord. The king said, I will give them. There was an oath made, and there was an oath broken, and there was a debt to pay. I call this the bad side of an oath. If you break an oath, who's responsible for the breaking of it? The one who broke it. Okay, the Gibeonites lived peacefully in the land of Canaan, in the land of Israel, for over 300 years because of that oath. Saul, who was part of that clan, the Benjamites, they wanted all of that land. They wanted those 3 cities, and they went in and they tried to decimate the Gibeonites against the oath. And what does it say in verse 1? There was a consequence to not holding up the oath that Joshua made with the Gibeonites. And there was a famine for 3 years. God got David's attention, and when God got David's attention, he made it right. It doesn't mean that oaths being broken can't be made right, but it does mean that there is a price to pay for not holding up your part of the oath. All right, so are we on the good already? Lucky you, man, I got through those things quickly. All right. You heard the passage that was read in chapter 8 of Hebrews, but I want to read to you a little bit in chapter 7, starting with verse 11. Let me preface it just a little bit. Okay, the book of Hebrews is talking about how Jesus can be high priest, how Jesus can have the place of the high priest, and how Jesus can continue for all times to be the high priest. We'll read verse 11 and following, and we'll see what happens. Now, if perfection was through the Levitical priesthood, for on the basis of it the people received the law, what further need was there for another priest to arise according to the order of Melchizedek, and not be designated according to the order of Aaron? So Melchizedek is a priest because he doesn't have a father and mother. He gets it for another reason we're going to look at pretty quick. But all of Aaron's family become priests and high priests because of lineage, because where they come from. They are from the clan of Levi. Verse 12. For when the priesthood is changed, the necessity there takes place a change of law also. For the one concerning whom these things are spoken belongs to another tribe, from which no one has officiated at the altar. For it is evident that our Lord was descended from Judah, a tribe with reference to which Moses spoke nothing concerning priests. Okay, decipher here. Jesus could never be a priest as long as he was here on the earth. Jesus could never be a priest as long as the law stayed intact and was in force. The only way Jesus could become a priest is to change the law. Verse 15. And this is clearer still. If another priest arises according to the likeness of Melchizedek, who has become such not on the basis of a law, of physical requirement, but according to the power of an indestructible life. For it is witnessed of him, thou art a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Verse 18, for on the one hand, there is a setting aside of the former commandment because of its weakness and uselessness. For the law made nothing perfect, verse 19, and on the other hand, there is a bringing in of a better hope through which we draw near to God, inasmuch as it was not without a what? Without an oath. For they indeed became priests without an oath, but he, Jesus, with an oath, through the one who said to him, the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. Thou art a priest forever. So much the more, also Jesus has become the guarantee, listen to it, of a better covenant. The former priests, on the one hand, existed in greater numbers because they were prevented by death from continuing. But he, Jesus, on the other hand, because he abides forever, holds his priesthood permanently. Now, tell me, how does Jesus hold his priesthood permanently? Psalm 104 was written about 1000 AD. Jesus is born at 1000 BC. Jesus is born at 0 AD. How many years have passed since God made the oath that Jesus would be a high priest? 1,000 years. Can you even imagine 1,000 years? 10 centuries? I mean, some of us here can imagine one century. I won't pick on them, but they're older than dirt, and you can find them, okay? 1 century. Some of us can envision a century, but to see 10 of them pass by, and to see that the oath was still in place, still in vogue, and when it was put into practice, it absolutely had power. Jesus became our high priest by an oath. And by an oath, God is fulfilling his promises to us to save us by an oath. Now, what does that mean? I've got 2 points to finish with here. First, God our Father, when he makes an oath, he stands by it. There will be nothing that will change it. There will be nothing that will make it better. There's certainly plenty of things that we can do to make it worse for ourselves. But when God makes an oath, he stands by it. And he expects everyone else to stand by it. This morning, I'm calling you, point number 2, to fulfill your oath to our Father in heaven. That because Jesus went to the cross, because he went to the tomb, because he was raised up from the dead, and because he became our high priest, that we give our allegiance to Jesus Christ. That we don't give one more inch of territory back to Satan. that we let go of what Satan has been doing to us on a daily basis, and we grasp the inheritance that we have in Jesus Christ, that we no longer live on a supposed idea that there might be a God and that there might be a Jesus. We live in the assurity that God exists and that Jesus went to the cross for us and he raised from the dead. That we no longer live in half-truths. You know, Jesus approached that idea. Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. He said it through Paul. But when he was talking directly to the Israelites, he said, don't swear. He said, because you swear by one thing in the temple and you mean one thing, and then if you swear by the gold of the temple, you mean another thing. They were using the oath as a way of deception, a way to deceive. And what I'm asking you this morning is to stop being deceived by the way you live for Jesus. Stop being deceived by thinking that showing up on Sunday morning is adequate. Stop living a facade life of Jesus by saying the right words, by being in the right place. But I'm calling you to a genuine faith that believes in the oath of God, that his salvation is true. There is no shadow of turning with him. There is no way that God is not going to fulfill his promises. Absolutely no way. He will. When I heard about the Ukrainians and when I saw their faces, it just made it more important to me to really recognize that we in America may be living in a fantasy life with Jesus, thinking that everything's going to be fine, that everything's going to work out. And we may be just like David, wondering why we're in a famine, why we're having trouble, why is there struggle. What I'm going to ask you to do is to seek the Lord. Joshua didn't seek the Lord when he made the treaty with an oath with the Gibeonites, but he had to keep it. Saul didn't keep the oath even though he knew what it was, paid the consequence. But you know what? Other people pay the consequence of our not keeping the oath. We pay personally. Our spouses pay as well. And our families may even pay more. Saul's 7 brothers or uncles, whoever they were taken out of their homes, put on stakes, and killed in front of everybody for their failure to follow and heed the oath. What I pray for is that we no longer allow ourselves, our spouses, and our families to fail before God. That we personally, we take it personally, and we hold on to the oath that we have given through our loving Jesus, having been baptized into his name and been given the forgiveness of sins. Please hold on completely to the oath that God said, anyone who believes in my Son will not perish, but have everlasting life. I pray for the Ukrainians, and I ask the Father that they center in on everlasting life, that they too hold on to the oath that God gave. And I pray for you. I'm asking you. I'm pleading with you. If you have broken the oath, please stop, think, and return. Pay whatever price needs to be paid to be able to come back to God, to his Son, Jesus, because his oath is complete and it is true. And on that last day, we will see his oath fulfilled for us. You may not be in the family of God yet. You may have not yet named Jesus as Lord. If that's the case, we're going to ask you to come forward now and make that known. And by confessing Jesus as Lord, you can be baptized for the remission of your sins. You can be let down in this watery grave, a sinner, and come up clean. It doesn't mean that you won't ever sin again, but it certainly means that God will fulfill his oath to you, to save you, and set you free. If you have any need, please come forward as we stand and we sing.